Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. So, today we are going to start one of the biological molecules, which are carbohydrates. Okay. So now, if we talk about the biological micromolecules, we are going to talk about. We're going to discuss carbohydrates, which will start today, and we'll finish as we are moving. Maybe probably in the next tutorial, we're going to finish carbohydrates. Okay. Then you also discuss lipids, proteins, and also nucleic acid. So these are going to be the biological molecules you are going to be discussing in this course. Okay. So now, if you have these molecules, let me just push it a bit here. Okay. So you have these biological molecules. So you will notice that. Okay. So you notice that the way these molecules are, so you get your carbohydrates, you get your proteins, you get your lipids, you get your nucleic acid there. You put them together. So these molecules, so a good number of them, they will give you cell components. Okay, so they will give you a cell. So these ones are the ones which are from those cell components you have. Okay, so from the cell, you're going to have what we call so same types of the cell. You're going to give you we are going to end up having a tissue. Okay, different types of tissues they form what we call an organ. Then from an organ, you are going to have a system. So different types of systems, different types of organs, they form a system. And then different types of systems. So if you talk about the system, you're talking about the central nervous system, the GIT, okay? You are also having the renal system. You have the cardiovascular system, okay? You have you have the renal system. All these types of systems, there are about 11 or 12 systems in the body. Okay, so you group them together, they form what we call an organism. Okay, so that's what you have in there. So now we are discussing these molecules, okay, that are forming cell components. Okay, so we'll start with carbohydrates. Okay, so carbohydrates. Now, let me take you back to organic chemistry. Okay, if you have uh, compounds which are made up of carbons and hydrogen. Those compounds are going to be called hydrocarbons. Okay. So now these molecules, the biological molecules you're talking about, they are actually hydrocarbons which are attached to other elements. So you can attach, so you have your carbon and hydrogen. You can attach to these hydrocarbons, you attach other uh, atoms. Let's say oxygen, you can attach nitrogen to them, okay? And then you form what we call organic compounds, okay? So these molecules are actually organic compounds, okay? So now, if we dive deep into carbohydrates themselves, okay? So carbohydrates are going to be made up of three atoms. So you have carbon and hydrogen, as usual. These are always there in these molecules, okay? So you have your carbon and hydrogen, then attached to this, you are going to have an oxygen atom, okay? So that's what we are going to have. So in carbohydrates, you are going to have carbon, hydrogen, and the oxygen atom, okay? Now, the ratio of the hydrogen to oxygen atom, so the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen atom in carbohydrate is 2 to 1. Okay. So this will help us tell in terms of the ability of this carbohydrate to store energy. Okay. One of the function of carbohydrate is that they are energy storage. Okay. So this ratio of hydrogen to oxygen is the one which is going to guide us on how much energy these carbohydrates are going to store. Okay. We'll compare them to lipids. We'll look at the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen in lipids. Okay. Then we are able to identify between lipids and carbohydrates which one is having high capacity in terms of storing your energy there. Okay, so that's what you are going to have. Okay. Okay, now carbohydrates are classified into four classes. Okay, so we can have classes of carbohydrates. We have four classes of carbohydrate. The first class is what we call monosaccharides. Okay, monosaccharides. Okay, so we have monosaccharides there. So monosaccharides simply mean one carbohydrate unit. Okay, so one unit of your carbohydrate. Okay, so these are simple sugars. Okay, simple sugars like your glucose. Okay, you can have your glucose. You can have your galactose. You can have your ribose. Okay, you can have your ribose sugar there. You can have your fructose. Okay, you can have your ribulose. All these are simple sugars. Okay, so simple sugars, they form what we call monosaccharides. That's the first class. Okay, so now we have these simple sugars. We can get two of these simple sugars to form what we call disaccharide. So di means two. Okay, so you have the second class, which is going to be called disaccharide. Okay, meaning two are sugars. Okay, so you have these are monomers. So these simple sugars are monomers. Now we get two of these. Let's say you get your glucose and you combine it with your fructose. Okay, you are going to form what we call a disaccharide. Okay, so you have your glucose. Okay, you link it with what we call fructose via a glycosidic bond. So a bond which is going to happen here is called a glycosidic bond. It's a covalent type of bond which is going to occur here called the O-glycosidic bond. Okay, so via the glycosidic bond, this glucose can link to fructose to form what we call sucrose. Okay, so a good example of disaccharide can be fructose, sucrose there. Okay, so you have sucrose, you can have lactose, okay, and maltose. These are common disaccharides we're going to have. So we are going to discuss in the next tutorial. We'll discuss how these are being formed. The disaccharides are being formed. The type of reactions which are happening. These bonds we discuss them further in the next tutorial. Okay, but for now we'll focus more on monosaccharides. Okay. Now, these monosaccharides, they can also be linked to a short chain, okay? So you can have 3 to 9 of these monosaccharides linked by this same glycosidic bond, okay? So 3 to 9 of them, they form another class, the third class, which is not there, it's not here. So the third class is called the oligosaccharides, okay? Oligosaccharides, okay? So you can have 3 to 9 of these monosaccharides linked by this glycosidic bond. They form what we call oligosaccharide. This is a short chain of these monosaccharides. Okay. Now, we get these monosaccharides, a lot of them, we form a long chain. Okay. We form a long chain. Okay. Let's say more than 30 of them. Okay. More than 30 of them, we link them together, we form what we call a poly. Poly mean many of these monosaccharides, okay? So you form a long chain of your monosaccharides, which is going to be called a polysaccharide, okay? That's a fourth class of your saccharides. Okay, so we'll discuss disaccharide, polysaccharide, and oligosaccharide in the next tutorial. But now I want us to focus on monosaccharide. What these are some of the monosaccharides we have, and what are their importance in the body. Okay, so that's what you have in there. Okay, so now if you talk about these monosaccharides, okay, so we simply have types. Okay, so you can have types depending on the number of carbon atoms you have. Okay, depending on the number of carbon atoms you have. Okay, so a monosaccharide with 3 carbon atoms is going to be called a triose. Okay, a monosaccharide with 4 carbon atoms is going to be called a tetrose. Then a monosaccharide with 5 is going to be called a pentose. Okay, with 6 is going to be called a hexose. Okay, So that's where we are going to end in terms of monosaccharide. At this level, we'll be ending on this hexose sugar. Okay, so these are simply monosaccharide with the 6 carbon atoms in them. Okay, that's what we're having. Okay, now, okay, now the other thing you need to talk about is the functional groups which are going to be present in this monosaccharide. Okay, so in all these types of monosaccharide can be a triose, a tetrose, a pentose, or hexose. You are going to have either two types. Any of this functional group is going to occur. Okay, so you can either have an aldose or a ketose. Okay, so now let's discuss the differences between these two functional groups. These are the functional groups which differentiate those types of sugars. Okay, so now let's say if you are talking about an aldose, okay, an aldose, the functional group of an aldose is going to be look like this. So you have a double bond. So you have this oxygen which is going to be double bonded to so you have a carbon double bonded to an oxygen atom. Okay, then you are going to have this carbon is going to be bonded to a hydrogen. Okay, then it's also going to be bonded to an other group. Okay, so in organic chemistry, most of the time when you see an other group like that, so this represents this long chain. Okay, so this is a long chain of carbons. Okay, so you can see this is carbon, carbon, carbon. So instead of me putting all these carbons linked together, yeah, I can just easily indicate an arrow there like that. Okay, so this represents this long chain of your carbon. Okay, so this is the functional group of or aldose, the functional group of which is aldose there. Okay, for a ketose, how it's going to look like? So a ketone is going to look like this. So you're going to have a double bond, oxygen, you have a carbon. Now here, you're going to have two other groups which are going to be there. Okay, so you can have this as my R2, this is my R1. Okay, so that's how the ketone is going to look like. Okay, so you're going to have this type of functional group. Okay, so now for carbohydrate, you notice that this type of a functional group is mostly found at carbon number 1. Okay, so I can go back to this one. If I was to label this carbons, I was to give these carbons numbers, I always start where the functional group is. Okay, so you can see our functional group is here. So here you can have this is carbon number 1, this is carbon number 2, okay, this is carbon number 3, this is carbon number 4, this is carbon number 5. Okay, so you notice that our functional group is at carbon number 1. Okay, for this one, you can see that this is carbon number 1, this is carbon number 2, this is carbon number 3, this is carbon number 4. Okay, so you notice that the functional group is at carbon number 2. So for an aldose sugar, okay, for an aldose sugar, for an aldose functional group is in a sugar molecule, the functional group is usually on carbon number at number 1. Okay, so at carbon number 1, you're going to have an aldose. Okay, that is going to be called an aldose. Okay, then at carbon number 2, you end up having a ketone. Okay, so you notice that here you have the functional group at carbon number 2. So that's a ketose sugar. Okay, so that's what you're having. Okay, now if we are to name this is 5 carbon atom. So this is an aldo pentose. Okay, so for pent means 5 carbon. Okay, so that's a pentose sugar. Okay, then for this one you can see here it's a 4 carbon sugar here. Okay, so meaning it's a tetrose. Okay, then you're having your functional group at carbon number 2, which we are saying is a ketone. So this is going to be a keto tetrose sugar. Okay, that's what we are having. So learn to differentiate these two functional group. Okay, so if you are, let's say, if I was to give an example for okay, so if I was to give an example for a glucose molecule and a fructose molecule, okay, so both of these, they are 6 carbon molecules, okay, so these are 6 carbon molecules, but the only difference that the glucose is going to be an aldose sugar, then your fructose is going to be a ketone sugar. So here you notice that the functional group of a glucose is going to be at position number 1, carbon number 1. Okay. Then for a fructose sugar, it's going to be at carbon number 2, at position number 2. That's the difference between these two. Okay. So learn to differentiate these two functional groups. These are the only functional groups you are going to see in the sugar molecule. Okay. Now, unless it has derivatives, okay, so you can end up having what we call a monosaccharide derivative. Derivatives is a process where we are at a functional group. It's either at a functional group or one of these carbons we attach a certain group, and that group is also a functional group. Okay, we are going to end up what we call monosaccharide derivatives. Okay, so you have your functional group here, then you attach another functional group. This is another functional group. This is an amino group. Okay, you can also attach here. You can see they have attached another functional group. That's an acetyl group. Okay, so you can either attach there, you attach there. As long as you've attached another functional group to this sugar, you are going to end up having derivatives. Okay, so a good example, you can have amino derivatives. Okay, so for amino derivatives, you can either attach your amino group there or acetyl group. Okay, so here you can see this is your carbon number 2. At carbon number 2, instead of you having OH there, you replace it with the an amine group there. Okay, so you've replaced it with an amine group. You've attached an amine group. Okay. Now this is a 6 carbon molecule. Okay. So this is carbon number 1. This is carbon number 2. Carbon number 3 there. Carbon number 4 and carbon number 5. Okay. So you notice this is a glucose molecule. Okay. The functional group is at position number 1. Okay. Even this one, the functional group is at position number 1. Meaning this is a glucose molecule. Okay. Now the other thing which you need to take note of is where this OH is at carbon number 5 of your molecule. So the second last carbon, you should always check where your hydroxide is located, the OH group. Okay. So if your OH group is on the right, you are going to have what we call a D isomer. Okay. If your OH group is on the left, okay. So let's say we had OH here, then hydrogen this side. We are going to have what we call an L isomer. So since in this case, our OH is on the right like that. Okay. So we're having our OH on the right here. This is a D. Okay. And we are saying this is a glucose molecule. So this is a D glucose. Okay. So you can see this D here representing where the OH is. So this is D glucose. So this glucose, now we have attached an amine group there. Okay, so this the name of this molecule becomes D-glucosamine. Okay, so you have what we call D-glucosamine there. Okay, I hope everything is clear here. Okay, now you have this one here. We attach an acetyl group. Okay, here we attach an amine. Here we attach an acetyl group. Okay, so here you can notice that on acetyl group, you have your carbon, which is linked to N. Okay, so that is where the N is coming from. Okay, and this is an acetyl group which has been linked to this carbon. Okay, so end up having N acetyl, still a D glucose. You can see the OH here. Okay, it's on the right. Okay, on carbon number 5. Okay, so always check the second last carbon. So it's on the right, so it's going to be a D-glucosamine in this case. Okay, so that's what we have here. That's one of the derivatives you can have. Okay, that was the amino sugars. Okay, then you can also have alcohols. You can have alcohols. You can see here your D-glucose. You can actually you can to your first carbon. So you either deal with the first carbon. Okay, so carbon number 1, that's where your functional group is. So you've seen what has happened to that functional group. Okay, so we can reduce the functional group there. Okay, so here you can see we've reduced our functional group. Okay, you have OH there. Okay, meaning you have added more hydrogen. So when you add more hydrogen to a molecule, you reduce it, okay? So when we reduce the first functional group there, you notice that you are going to have what we call sorbitol, okay? So we have OH there, we've reduced the first, our functional group here, we've reduced it, we've added more hydrogen to it, okay? So we end up having an alcohol called sorbitol, okay? You can see here for xylulose, okay? Xylulose is a 5 carbon sugar. So meaning you have, this is carbon number 1, carbon number 2, carbon number 3, carbon number 4, and carbon number 5. Still a D, you can see the OH is on the right there, okay? So it's D-xylulose, okay? So notice what has happened. You can also reduce it here on the functional group. You reduce it, end up having what we call xylitol there, okay? You can do the same to libulose. For libose, okay, so for libose, it's also a 5 carbon sugar, okay? So this is D, still D. You can see the OH is still on the left there. You can still reduce it on the first, on the functional group. You reduce your functional group, you end up having an alcohol called D-butyl there, okay? So this tells us if we reduce the functional group of our glucose or carbon number 1, reduce our sugar molecule at carbon number 1, okay, you end up having an alcohol. So these are some of the derivatives, okay? So instead of you having an aldehyde the way you're having here, you end up having an alcohol as a functional group, okay? That's what we have, okay? So you can also have a carboxylic acid, okay? So here you can see what has happened to this group. We have actually oxidized it, okay? So we've added an oxygen to the last group there, okay? So you notice that we've added an oxygen to this group, okay? And the other one, okay? So this one. So to both at position number 1 and position number 2, we've added oxygen there. So we've oxidized it, okay? So we end up having a carboxylic acid. This is a carboxylic acid. We've turned our functional group to a carboxylic acid. So this is glucose, okay? Still D-glucose, your OH is still on the right, okay? Now we've oxidized the first carbon and the second carbon, end up having what we call a uronic acid, okay? So when you oxidize position number 1 and 2, and position number 6, or the first position and the last position, you oxidize them, end up what we call a uronic acid. End up getting what we call a uronic acid. So uronic acid is a type of acid which is having two functional group, carboxylic acid and this group here, okay, which is an aldehyde group there, okay. So here you notice that you have your D-gluconic acid here. So you have D-gluconic acid, which has been turned to D-glucouronic acid. So uronic, you've converted it to a uronic acid. Okay, so these are some of the derivatives, the sugar derivatives you can have when it comes to monosaccharide. Okay, so you can either oxidize, reduce your monosaccharides. These are good examples of the derivatives of your monosaccharides. Okay. Okay, now these monosaccharides have the general formula. The general formula for monosaccharides is actually CH2O. Okay, so this is the general formula for monosaccharide. Okay, this N represents the number of carbons. Okay, so if you're having 3 carbons, so for all trioses, you're going to have C3H6 or O3 as the general formula for all trioses. Okay, trioses here. Okay, for tetroses, you have 4 there, so you're going to have C4H8, then you have O4. Okay, this is for tetroses. Okay, then for pentoses, that's where there's a bit difference there. The general formula for pentoses is going to be C5. You're going to have H10 and O5 there. Okay, so this does not apply to all pentose sugars. Okay, so this can apply to pentose sugars, but not all of them. So pentose sugars, you can have a ribose sugar, you can have ribulose, okay? You can have azellulose, okay? So these are pentose sugars, but you can also have what we call a deoxyribose sugar, deoxyribose sugar, okay? For deoxyribose sugar, you notice that at carbon number 2 of your sugar molecule, you usually remove, okay, so let me go back to where we had the ribose sugar, okay? So this is a ribose sugar, okay? So this is a ribose sugar. So for a deoxyribose, you focus on carbon number 2 here. So if you go to your carbon number 2, notice that there's OH there. Okay. Now for a deoxyribose, you usually remove an oxygen atom there. Okay. So you remove one oxygen, you end up having only an H there. That is going to be a deoxyribose sugar. Okay. So a deoxyribose sugar is going to look like this. So we have H. We're going to have at carbon number 2 now, you're just going to have an H instead of having OH there. Then you have H, okay? Carbon number 3, you have the way it is. Also carbon number 4, the way it is, okay? OH, okay? Then you have the last one, which is C2OH there, okay? But at carbon number 2 here, you notice that you remove an oxygen, okay? You remain with hydrogen only. So this is going to be a deox. Deox meaning you've removed one oxygen there. So deoxyribose sugar. Okay. Now for deoxyribose sugar, it's not going to have the general formula like for all pentoses. This one is going to have its general formula. Okay. So you notice that one oxygen was removed. So it's going to be 4 like that. So it's going to be C5H10 4. But all pentose sugars, the general formula for all pentose sugars is going to be like this, except for a deoxyribose sugar. Okay. So that's what you're having. Okay. Okay. So this is what we have. So the most common monosaccharides we usually be encountering arabinose sugar. You can have a deoxyribose sugar. You can have the eulibose, you can have fructose, glucose, galactose, mannose. These are common monosaccharides we're going to have. So for arabinose, deoxyribose, ribose, these are pentoses. Glucose, fructose, galactose, mannose, these are uh, uh, hexose sugars. Okay, there are 5 carbon sugar. There are 6 carbon sugars. These ones. Okay, then the other ones there are 5 carbon sugar. Okay, so that's what you have there. Okay, now let's talk about these monosaccharides. Let's discuss some of them one by one. We'll discuss more about this guy, fructose and glucose. Okay, we need to know what these guys are made up of. Okay, so now let's do that for today. So we start with your glucose molecule there, okay? So if you check your glucose molecule, its general formula, it's just like any other hexose sugars. You have your C6H12O6 there, okay? From this CH2, okay? From this one, you have N, which is equal to 6. You end up having C6H12O6, okay? As the general formula for your glucose, okay? So now this glucose is very important. It acts as your energy source. Okay. So you get your energy in form of ATP through the metabolism of this glucose. As you are metabolizing this glucose molecule, you end up getting energy in form of ATP. Okay. So you have body organs like your brain. Okay. This brain doesn't have a mitochondria. Okay. So for body organs where there's no mitochondria, okay, so you get your energy from glucose metabolism, okay. So you have your brain which will get energy from glucose, okay, the metabolism of glucose. So that tells you that you need to be eating even before you study. You need to put some glucose so that you have your brain. The brain, this one, is able to work when it has energy, and the only source of energy for the brain is here from your glucose molecule, the glucose you are taking. Okay, so the more you take your glucose molecule, the more you provide the brain with energy. Okay, So don't be starving as you are studying. Make sure you have enough food so that you should be able to your brain should be able to work properly because it's getting energy when the food you are eating. Okay, so that's what you have there. So glucose is actually the source of energy for our body. Okay, now you have these conditions. You can have glucose levels in the body. Okay, so you have a situation where there are high glucose levels in the body. Okay, the reason for high glucose levels in the body can be maybe the insulin is not enough. Okay, so there is lack of insulin. Okay, you know the insulin is the one which is able to reduce glucose levels in the body. Okay, okay. So now if insulin is not there, you are end up having high glucose levels. Okay, so because of these high glucose levels, a condition where you're having high glucose levels is also known as hyperglycemia. Okay, so you have hyper. So hyper means high. Okay, so hyperglycemia. So hyperglycemia is a condition where you have high glucose levels in the body. Okay. Okay, so now we have already mentioned the reason for these high glucose levels can be because of lack of insulin, okay? And hypoglycemia is related to conditions such as diabetes, okay? So diabetes mellitus there, okay? So you can have diabetes mellitus because of high glucose levels in the body, okay? So you can have types. You can have type 1 diabetes mellitus and type 2 diabetes mellitus. Okay, depending on the types you're having. Okay, so it's either there is insulin sensitive or there are no the insulin receptors are not sensitive to insulin, or they are just low levels of insulin. Okay, so if there are low levels of insulin in the body, that is going to be your type 1 diabetes mellitus. Or you can have a situation whereby the receptors are not sensitive to this insulin. Okay, that is going to be called type 2 diabetes mellitus. Okay, so you discuss more as you are moving this. Okay, maybe in your second year, you discuss more about these types of diabetes. Okay, but for now, a situation where you have high glucose levels in the body is called hyperglycemia, and it is related to conditions such as diabetes. Okay. Now, a situation where you have low glucose levels in the body, okay, and that low glucose levels can bring about a lot of complications. Okay, you can have muscle weakness there. Okay, you can have mental confusion. Like we have highlighted, this brain is able to work uh, when there is energy available, and the source of energy is glucose. Now, if you have low glucose levels in the body, you are fasting, you can end up having what we call mental conditions. Okay, because of a condition called hypoglycemia. Now, for high glucose levels, we made mention that it's hyperglycemia, high glucose level. Hypo meaning low. For hypo, so we mean most of the time, science, when you hear hypo, just know that you're talking about low levels. So hypoglycemia is a situation where there are low glucose levels in the body. Okay, that's what you have there. Okay, so that's the importance of this glucose in our body. Okay, okay. Now, if you talk about the structure of the glucose molecule, so as we are moving, make sure you are able to know most of these structures for these sugar molecules. Okay, so like your glucose common, you need to know this structure. So a glucose can be in a ring form or a Fisher projection. So you have a Fisher projection of your glucose molecule or a ring form. Okay, so this is a ring of six membered ring. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is six carbon here. So it's a six-membered ring. It's actually called a pyranose ring. Okay, this is a pyranose ring. Okay, for a six-membered ring. Okay, this is a Fisher projection. Okay, so you need to know. Okay, so you also need to take note of where the OH is located. Okay, so if the OH in a glucose molecule, any other sugar molecule, you're having a ring structure, then the OH is down. Okay, at carbon number 1, this is carbon number 1, you have your OH is located down. This is going to be called an alpha. Okay, so this is, in this case, you have an alpha glucose there. Okay, so if we are also to consider a feature projection, you can see this is actually on the right. So you can say this is an alpha D glucose. Okay, so this is going to be an alpha D glucose. Okay, so this is important. It's going to be important for you to understand how we are going to be forming those disaccharides and the type of bonds which are going to be happening there. So you need to know the structures of these molecules. Okay, so here you have your alpha D glucose molecule, and the feature projection is going to look like this. Okay. You can have fructose, another hexose sugar. Okay. So this fructose is used in the manufacturing of your soft drinks. Okay. Your canned fruits, your jam. You use fructose to manufacture those ones. Okay. Just like any other hexose sugar, the general formula for this fructose is going to be C6H12O6. Okay, it's the same formula with glucose. Okay, so meaning it's an isomer of glucose, but the only difference is where the functional group is located. Okay, so you notice that for a okay, okay. For a glucose molecule, the functional group is actually at position number 1. Okay, so you have your functional group, which is at position number 1 there of the glucose molecule. Your COH, your COH is at position number 1 in your glucose molecule. But for a fructose, you're going to notice that the functional group for this one, okay, is going to be actually at position number 2. Okay, so you notice that here the functional group is at position number 2 of your fructose molecule there. Okay, that's what you are having. That's the only difference between fructose and the glucose molecule. Okay. You also need to know the structures of this fructose and your glucose molecule. Okay. So a fructose, if in a ring structure, you are going to have what we call a Furanus ring. Okay, so you have a Furanus ring. Okay, structure. It's a Furanus ring structure type. Okay, so this is a 5-membered ring. This is your carbon number 1, carbon number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. So it's a 5-membered ring here. Okay, that's what we are having in terms of your fructose. Yeah. Okay, so this is actually D fructose. Okay, so you can see there your OH is also on the right. Okay, so that's what you have on fructose. Okay, can also have other sugars like galactose. Okay, so galactose has a similar structure with glucose. The only difference is that one position where the OH is arranged, the arrangement of the OH at one position. That's the only difference. Okay, so this one is actually an epimer of the glucose molecule. Okay, so that's galactose. Okay, one thing I need to mention, the use of this fructose, you can actually get your fructose, you combine it with your glucose. Okay, you are going to form what we call sucrose. Okay, okay. Now you can get this galactose, you combine it, so you can get your galactose, you combine it with the glucose, actually going to form your lactose. Okay, so this is the sugar you find in milk. Okay, lactose sugar. Okay, so that's where that's the use of this lactose. Okay, then you can also have what we call the ribose sugar. So this ribose sugar is the one we use actually in our genetic material, the DNA. Okay, so DNA is going to be made up of 3 parts: a sugar molecule, which is a pentose sugar in form of ribose. Okay, so you're going to have a ribose sugar, which is going to be attached to a nitrogenous base. So you can have your nitrogenous base there and a phosphate group. This is forming what we call your DNA. So you have your ribose sugar. Okay, same with your deoxyribose sugar. Okay, so you can have a deoxyribose sugar, which can be a part of your genetic material there. Okay. So this is actually what we call, so if it's a ribose sugar, you have what we call RNA. If it's a deoxyribose sugar, can have what we call DNA. Okay, so we'll discuss this when we start doing nucleic acid. Okay, so that's a use of these sugars and the structure. So make sure you know the structures of these sugar molecules you're having. Okay. Okay, now another issue I introduced was the issue of alpha and beta, which I've already mentioned. So it's about the OH at position number 1. This is your carbon number 1. Okay, if your OH is down at position number 1, you are going to have an alpha. Okay, so in this case, it's a glucose molecule, so it's going to be an alpha D glucose. Okay, if your OH is on top, okay, you can see here the OH is on top, is what we call a a a beta. Okay, so in this case, you have a beta D glucose. Okay, so that's what you're having. Okay, so now we have the formation of types of two types of ring. So you have what we call a pyranose ring and what we call a furanose ring. Okay, so these rings were actually formed because of the reaction between this OH. So you get your OH here, you react it with the functional group, should be able to form a furanose ring. So you form a 5-membered ring. Okay. For glucose, you can get your OH here. Okay. You react it with a functional group at position number 1, should be able to form a pyranose ring there. Okay. So that's what we have in terms of monosaccharides. Okay. So this is what I was talking about. Okay. So you can have the pyranose form or the furanose form there. Okay. So that's what we have. Okay, so for today, we'll end here. Next time we meet, we'll continue with our carbohydrates. Okay, so we are going to go on disaccharides, and we before we even do disaccharides, we'll look at some of the monosaccharides maybe. Okay, so okay, I think we are done with all monosaccharides. We've mentioned most of the things that are needed to be mentioned on monosaccharides. So we'll start from disaccharides, then we'll move to oligosaccharides. We'll talk a bit about oligosaccharides, then we'll finish with the uh, polysaccharides. Okay, so that's how we are going to move. Then from there, we are going to have a class where we are going to do questions on this topic on polysaccharides, on carbohydrates. Okay, so you're going to get test questions from where we've started from to here. We get test questions, then we try to go through and answer some of the test and exam questions. We see how we are going to move. Okay, so now for you to be part of that, you need to register with us. Okay, you can also get access to other topics we've done so far on our website. Okay, so you can register with us. So how to register? You you open your browser, okay, like that. So when you open your browser, so if you are using an Android phone, you can actually download our app on Play Store. You just download the apps, District Learning Institute. Okay. If you open the browser, me I usually open it mostly. Okay, so you will see the link there for District Learning Institute. So you click on it, it will actually take you to our website. Okay, so when you go to our website, you have this here. So where it's saying subscribe to a course, so you can actually click there and subscribe to a course of your choice. Okay, so you just check the courses which are available. So if you want biology, you can subscribe for biology there by clicking where it says subscribe. Then you should be able to find lessons on other topics. Okay, so if you subscribe, you are able to open the folder. So let's say if you subscribe for biology, you can open the folder for biology there. Okay, so you have these folders inside. Okay, so you have lessons and tutorials, you have handwritten summarized notes. You can also have tutorial sheets and assessment. Okay, so even notes, whatever we're going to do, I'm going to post them here. So you find them on the website. Okay, so you just go to any of the folders you want. If you want past papers, quizzes, you find them. Lab report samples, they are there. Okay. So you can for lessons like these ones, tutorials and lessons, you can actually click where I said lessons and tutorials. Then you find different topics there which you are able to learn at your own pace. Okay. So you continue also continue with live classes for those who have subscribed with us. Okay, so we'll be doing live classes just in case you have a question. If you miss a class, you should be able to access the videos here. And if there's a question, you can actually consult with us. Okay, so end here for today. Okay.